Alright, hello everybody, Michael with MeQ and Gunstocks here. Today I wanted to go over with you the basic dimensions and layout for a custom stock project. So this is a new to me airgun FX Dreamline, and I want to start by tracing out the factory stock, determine what its dimensions are and how closely that fits in with the standard dimensions I like to design around, and then take a look at what a custom shape might look like based on those dimensions. So I'm probably going to get my head in the way, but I'm just going to trace this out. Get my head in between the tripod, show you the back of my head. I'm sure the trigger guard location is not important, but I'm just tracing it out anyway, so we have a nice visual representation to refer to of what a finished gun stock might look like. I'm going to mark where the wood ends, but trace the back of the recoil pad. And same thing there on the top, mark where the wood ends. Top of the comb, back of the wrist, and it's kind of hard to do. Let me try this one again. You know, you got a big air gap down there, and I'm going to put a little caret mark here that that's the correct line. The other one was not correct, and they didn't give us much of a flat surface to mark off for the top of the forearm. If we did the other side of the stock, this has a longer flat mark, but that looks okay. Now I'm going to put the action in the wood and mark out two other datums, the trigger and the center of the optic. And if you'll be patient with me for a minute, I'm going to go ahead and stick the action screws in here to make sure the metal is pulled tightly down into the wood. I know for the optic that is coming for this gun that these are the mounts that will be used. Fabricate my own reach forward mount. The only reach forward mount I found online, despite its $40 price, is also I think going to be too short. So I found in my box of scope mounts this from some other project at some point that I think will accomplish the goal. So now I'm just going to try to place the stock back on top of my drawing. It's always a little tricky, especially with the tripod in my way, but that looks pretty good. So I'm going to try to eyeball the trigger here. Very poorly sketched. And I'm going to make some marks here for the center of the optic. Now very often what I do is use dimensions and measure rather than just eyeball sketching like I'm doing right now. I think this initial eyeball sketch is fine for the purposes of determining what kind of shape I think I want for this project. And when it comes time to actually make wood dust, I'll be a little more accurate. And then of course the primary objective of this exercise is for you to just go over the basic stock layout. Alright, so that's set out of the way. I'm going to draw some lines. Here, the top of the forearm, for such as it is, what we have of it. Extend that out here, and then the center of the optic, which I got 4 little dots to judge from, and I'm going to use another straight edge to just help me see if I'm parallel to the forearm. And yeah, we'll just sort of average out all those dots, and we'll draw this as a center line. Oh, didn't do a very good job there. Oh, and that was the power supply for the camera, so hold on, I gotta jiggle you for a minute. Oh boy. Okay. Let me do something here with this power supply. Alright, get it up there out of the way. Just the camera. Sorry about that. It's amateur hour here. Okay. So we got the center of the optic drawn. We got the top of the forearm drawn back. Now we can start making some dimensions. Or measurements, I should say. So the first dimension that we pay attention to when designing a stock is the center of the optic. It's the eyeball that everything starts from. And typically the center of the eyeball to a location just underneath the cheekbone is for most people in the range of 2 to 2¼ inches. Let's see what this factory stock is. And here to the top of the comb, it looks like we have 2 3/8, close to 2 1/4. I'm going to call it 2 3/8. And because this is angled, and they usually are, I go to the mean, to the average dimension. So we'll call this, double check, yep, 2 3/8. So only a tiny bit further than I like. I personally like 2 inches. I did feel like the top of the comb does land at about the center of my jaw and goes down the middle of the cheek, fairly well below the cheekbone. So on a custom design stock for myself, I'd try to get it to 2 1/4 to 2 inches. Another critical dimension is the grip length, and that's from the trigger to the back of the wrist. Typically, I don't try to go over 3 inches, 3 3/8, and what we have here does look like 3 inches. This is a nicely designed stock. Yep, looks like just about 3 inches. Very good. Another dimension we look at is drop. So drop is really what it controls is how vertical your head is while shooting, or how laid down forward on the stock your head is. And we measure it from the top of the forearm to the top of the buttstock, but what it's really controlling is center of the optic to top of the shoulder. But this is the measurement that we use as our datum. Kind of silly. I guess it's a little confusing. I think a lot of people don't really have an understanding of what we're really measuring when we measure drop, but this is the number we use, and so this is 1 1/16, and that's a modest amount. And then this is 5 inches here. I can go ahead and sketch in the back of the wood just for fun. So now what I'll do, I'll change colors, is mark out where I want the top of the comb. Now it could be that this project may want iron sights, and then maybe the center of the optic is way down here. If that's the case, so be it. We measure down 2 to 2¼ inches, draw a mark, and that's going to be the top of our comb for that kind of a mission. And then that kind of stock is going to have a lot of drop in order to get that low wood position up on your cheek. But this is what we're designing around here, and so I'm going to mark off 2 inches right there. Yep, that is. And then I'll go ahead and sketch this end at a slightly jaunty angle. Now, of course, in a firearm, the reason for this angle is during recoil, the wood leaves your cheek. If it doesn't, if it's the opposite effect and the wood is going to smack into your cheek during recoil, well, obviously that would be very uncomfortable. And it also makes follow-through more difficult if the stock during recoil is pushing your face out of the way. So that's the main reason for that angle. Of course, here we have a non-recoiling gun, so the only reason for an angle of tilt here would be aesthetics. And it's always nice to have things look pleasing to the eye. Okay, so now I've got a American Classic stock here that was a reject from one of the mills I go to and was inletted for some mystery firearm. And my idea is to fill this inletting up with the epoxy or Bondo, and or also sometimes I've used expanding polyurethane foam, but the mold making kind of stuff, not like you would use to fill gaps in your foundation. That same chemistry comes in varying weights, and I have some stuff that's very dense and is used for casting tooling, so could use that as well. But the idea is to fill it all in and then mill it out on the milling machine by hand to fit this action. Now I could put this in the duplicating machine and copy the inletting, but the inletting for this action is really very simple. It's just a big square well and then a round well. So I think I can hog it out on the milling machine, glass bed it to perfectly copy the shape, and then have something that we can call a master. So that would be the idea on how to do it, but let's see if we like it. So when I do this, I'm going to match up the grip length, because that's kind of the critical dimension that we're working with here. Everything else is changeable, but it would be difficult, you know, if I lined up some feature this way and then try to make the grip right later, that'd be very difficult. So we're just going to match up the grip something like that. Just get it kind of close. This will probably change in the future as I work on this, but this is just a, you can see all these different angles are different from our gun, but that's okay. I think I'm going to let the forearm slope away on the top, because that can be filled. And I'm just messing with this one way or another. Yep, I think we're just going to kind of split the difference and go with that. Yeah, let's try this. So I'm going to trace this because that's all wonky angles. Same thing with the top. That'll all get changed with Bondo. But the grip here is kind of the critical dimension. And okay, I'm sorry. I think I'm happy now. So let's trace this out. Now my goal for this build, this project's for me, it's not for a client. My goal for this is a lightweight, offhand capable field gun. Not that the factory stock is heavy, but and because I wanted it for offhand shooting, I do like having the minimally dropped stock with the low head position. It enhances pointing. You know, if you want to point at something out there with your hand, you would maybe crouch down low and throw your arm out in front of you very straight, and maybe your head would fall down onto your bicep a little bit, or the top of your shoulder a little bit, as your whole upper body gets engaged with the act of pointing at something. That's, you know, if you want to point at something really aggressively, like right now, just really point at it, you would stretch your hand out and your face would fall to the top of your shoulder, and your whole upper body would be engaged in the act of pointing. And that's what we're looking at with American Classic type of stock with minimal drop. It's it enhances the shooting stick kind of idea and enhances the upper body pointing aspect. So I like those features of a minimally dropped stock for offhand shooting. So, okay, we got that all drawn out. I can take this out of the way. I'm sorry, I'm babbling too much. So we can see that if I'm going to use that as the beginning of a master, that where my cone lies is below the wood on that starter piece of wood. So this will become something like this. This will probably be, it could be a rollover. It could be an undercurve shape like Air Arms does. But I think I would do the Monte Carlo rollover on this design. You see we'll lose a lot of grip here. We're going to lose some material here. We pick up a little bit here. But in terms of our lightweight aspect. And then we could also always do something like this to further lighten it up. And that was a little bit of an aggressive curve, but you know, we could do something like that maybe. And then I see here that our 3-inch dimension on that master starter, this would have to be, we'd have to remove some wood here to get this grip length down where we want it. But that can all fit. So this drop is really minimal, like a 1/4 inch drop. That's nice. And if I wanted to add a little bit to it, I could do that. I could just shave this down on the belt sander a little bit, and I could add on a little bit with Bondo, or I could just adjust the tilt, you know, when I lay this out. But that's a pretty close fit. The another dimension we didn't look at was the length of pull, and of course we'd be more accurate about this at the time of cutting the stock as we finish it. But just as a rough guess, this factory stock was looks like about 14 inches, and I have a tool for making this measurement a little more accurate. Here, let me just eyeball it. Yeah, we got 14 inches is what we got. I like a length of pull a little bit longer, but this was entirely shootable, and a 1/2 inch longer than a lot of air gun stocks we see. That I'd say the average that we see, especially with brake barrel guns, is 13.5, and that's just a little too short for most full-grown adult American men. So there you have it. The design starts with the center of the eye, and then the top of the comb is based from where that is. The drop is based on how vertical or laying down you want your head to be, and it's really measuring the center of the optic to the top of the shoulder, but the measurement we use as a datum is the top of the forearm extended back to the top of the back of the buttstock. And then, of course, the length of pull is from the trigger to the mean. If, you know, a lot of factory stocks are cut at this kind of an angle. I like to cut mine 90 degrees to the top of the forearm. But the length of pull is measured to the average center of the butt. And yep, I think that pretty much went over everything. Hope that was a help to you. I will take you along on this project as I fill the inletting on this American Classic stock and get it milled out. But this project's for me, and it's got to happen slow because I also have an HW brake barrel stock to do for somebody else. So in very short order, I'll have you with me over at the duplicating table. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, subscribe if you are so inclined, and I'll be back on soon.